Preface, Part 4 of 4. Anyway, the point to make here is that we must be sympathetic to our reality. We cannot hope to become free of fault, and there is no fault which is without benefit. Every quirk and foible, whether vestigial or new, within us is as part of our makeup. We have our tensions and deficiencies within us until our last breath. You, like I, must find ways to compensate against our faults. And if we run out of ideas, we have the ultimate nuclear options. Patience and humor. Oh yes. It is neither our aim to become perfect, nor to expect that the world around us behaves in the way we would like. This is unrealistic, and moreover, very unkind to our well-being. Perfectionism and high expectations are a recipe for sadness and frustration. We earn self-respect and the love of others simply by making humble daily efforts to take the world as we find it. Many of your peers will be running around in the hopeless drudgery of everyday life because they haven't really learned that higher purposes are essential things, not solely reserved for whimsical, religious zealots or unhinged types. Maybe your peers will see their highest purpose as material success, and no more. They confuse contentment with comfortable stagnation. The truth about truly brilliant people is that they really do listen to the audible voice within them that harks to a higher purpose, but they also realize that such lofty things are not achieved by reciting borrowed mantras, aromatherapy, or a year in Nepal. Hovering over a rock in some kind of dissociated oblivion. Try those things, they help a little, but don't expect guaranteed results or that the highs will last. Remain grounded, because there is no shame when you do need to get on and earn a crust sometimes. January 2018. Winby, 3rd floor. My neighbor is Trevor. He is cheerful and twinkly. He has not many months left, but doesn't care. People who are content and successful work industriously and diligently, like anyone else can, but they don't take unimportant things to heart. They have a sense of joy that comes from not taking work and employment too seriously, and from grasping the present time as enthusiastically as they can, keeping an eye on their real goals and purposes, which seem to float over and above any immediate snags. The only time there has ever been to make the most of yourself is right now. Always ask yourself, if I were my future self looking back, is what I am doing right now going to seem a good idea? Right single quotation mark. Scientifically, there is plenty of good basis for how this book is conceptualized. My work mission was always to help people to manage their minds in a way that helps them achieve contentment, peace, and success. Once upon a time, I trained as a neurosurgeon, wielding a scalpel over their brains. Then later in my career, I became a neuropsychiatrist, giving them medicines and psychological advice. Now, I just have open hands and love for you. You are blessed with your mother's stability of mind, and have never suffered the stabbing pains of mental illness that have picked on my brains over the years. May you always thrive. Research has told us much, over the last 20 years, about the mindsets and practices of people who are exceptionally happy, incredibly resilient, commercially successful, or spectacularly creative. This learning has emerged from fields such as neuroscience, medicine and psychology, but also from newer and equally impactful fields such as positive psychology and genetics. I have drawn on a patchwork of all of these things to create a simplified central idea of the mind, which respects the biological facts and psychological methods equally, because I believe in having a foundation of simple reality, whilst keeping things mentally engaging, really amusing and educational. The model I have coined is that there are 3 basic ingredients to the human mind, from lowest to highest. I have called them the ego, the intellect, and true self, respectively. In other words, this writing has scientific roots, but I have made it wear fancy boots. It flows better to write a bit less seriously, and you will hopefully find it more readily readable and memorable. I refuse to talk about crystal healing and astrology though. Being real, scientifically based, and knowing what works. If you are watching or listening to this, there is a diagram which appears now. Look at it. If you can't find it, tough luck I guess. Anyway, you don't need it that much. Listen. I have not set out to produce an encyclopedia of detail. Rather, these scribbles are a straightforward guide on how to apply one's mind to the problem of what really matters in life. I hate when people excessively refer to science and jargon to try to prop up their dim writing. I, on the other hand, will endeavor to use clunky, often inappropriate words and explain things like you and I are 7 years old. I will fail at that too, but it will be a more honest failure than losing you in jargon. However, here is some jargon for you for the next few paragraphs, just to underline that there is something proper going on behind the plinky-plonk writing in the rest of this book. The first part of the mind, the ego, has quite firm and prehistoric biological roots. The prehistoric neural pathways in the brain are the seat of emotions and instincts. The ego's functions are localized in the midbrain, base ganglia, and autonomic nervous system, and the ego's strength over us is underwritten by how well its various functions, as rapid and destructive as they can be, have served our species very well. Its connections radiate upwards in the brain, connecting to the newer, more grayer parts, and downwards, investing itself in our very heart rate, breathing rate, sweating, and other organs. The ego is biological, raw, brutal, cruel, kind and wonderful. The second part of the mind, the intellect, can be said to be found in the frontal and prefrontal regions of the brain. The upper and outer parts, behind your forehead, that look like a waffle-shaped blancmange. The intellect is more distributed and associative in its projections. Finally, the third part of the brain, the highest part, or the true self, is the source of your consciousness of yourself, in all its meanings. It is the most widely distributed of all as a structure, if indeed it could be called a structure. It is more like a collection of functions of self-monitoring. It is a floating, plastic network of wiring and nodes, with interests and real estate all over the place. A more diffuse superstructure with cortico-cortical, cortico-ganglial and corticothalamic projections, in a magnificent and still not fully discovered pattern. So that's the anatomy, but there's also the methods to consider. The techniques of mental well-being I will describe in this book also have firm evidence behind them. My discussion on tackling negative thoughts and dealing with our roles owe much to very effective techniques from CBT and CIT that are part of the bread and butter of effective modern psychological practice. Mindfulness, also known as attention training, has been extensively researched over the past 20 years in the best institutions from Harvard to our very own Oxford, and it has been shown to have incredible benefits, even if practiced in small amounts every day. Perhaps more than others, mindfulness does have a way of combining the scientific with the divine in an elegant way. It's July 2018. I am on B Wing, on the 3rd floor. My neighbor is called Richard. He is a delirious old man from Belgravia. I hope you have been reading my notes with an optimistic and open point of view. I hope you do as I do when reading anything I hope to learn from. I regularly pause, look upwards, take a deep breath, and reflect on what I have just read, comparing it to my own knowledge and hoping to force some kind of connection to form inside, ideally a ridiculous or funny one. Because once the thought is in there it can start to rattle around and do good work. In time, I have used this pedestrian method to learn some helpful technique or gain insight to further my life in the efforts I make to be a little less of an idiot. I hope you feel less idiotic too. I detect even in your young minds the kind of self-deprecating conscientiousness that is both charming and oppressive, upon your wonderfully blessed, gentle characters. If you are reading this, you have already decided to have a go. Nice one. Turning up, as they say, is half the victory. Onward to the first proper chapter we go next. For those watching or hearing this on YouTube, there will be diagrams which pop up on screen which you can find in the book. They will help explain what I am blithering on about.